The orc woman standing at his gate held a worn cavalry sword across her back and looked him straight in the eye without a trace of nervousness, which was more than Nathaniel Morrison could say for himself. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the stone bench beneath the old oak that shaded the manor's entrance. "You came about the bodyguard position. I read your notice in town." She did not sit. Her green skin caught the afternoon light, and the small tusks at the corners of her mouth gave her words a slight whistle that somehow made her sound more confident rather than less. "You breed horses. You travel to markets alone. You have had 3 attempts on your property in the last year." "That is correct." Nathaniel shifted the leather folder in his hands. He had prepared questions. He had prepared to be professional about this. "Your name?" "Rasha Greenfield. Military experience, 5 years with the Border Cavalry. Honorable discharge." She reached into the pack at her feet and withdrew a folded parchment. "My commanding officer wrote a letter." He took it, scanned the crisp handwriting that praised her vigilance, her skill with both blade and bow, her steady nerve under fire. Everything he needed. Everything he had hoped to find when he posted that notice 2 weeks ago after the last break-in attempt left his stable master with a broken arm. "The pay I listed is fair," Nathaniel said. "Room in the East Wing, meals with the household staff, and Sundays off. I travel to 3 markets regularly and need someone who can watch my back on the road and keep an eye on the manor when I am here." Rasha Greenfield listened to all of this with her arms crossed, her pointed ears tipped slightly forward. When he finished, she nodded once. "I have a counteroffer." Nathaniel blinked. "The pay is negotiable within reason." "Not the pay." She took a step closer, and he noticed she was not particularly tall for an orc, perhaps 5 feet and 7 inches, built lean and strong like the horses he raised. "I will not be your bodyguard, Nathaniel Morrison. I will be your wife." The folder slipped from his hands, papers scattered across the flagstones. What? A wife guards a home better than any hired sword." Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as though she had proposed a sensible amendment to a grain contract. "A bodyguard watches your back for coin. A wife watches your back because it is hers to watch. She has a stake in your life, your land, your future. She does not leave when the pay runs dry or a better offer comes. She stays." Nathaniel bent to gather his papers, buying time, his thoughts spinning. "You do not know me. I know you need protection. I know you are a good horseman with a solid reputation. I know this manor sits on valuable land and you have enemies who want it. I know you are afraid." That last word hit like a fist. He straightened, papers clutched against his chest. "I am not afraid." "Then why hire a stranger instead of remarrying?" Rasha tilted her head. "A man in your position, respected, prosperous, still young enough. You should have suitors. You should have a wife, but you want a bodyguard instead, someone professional. Someone you can pay to leave if things get dangerous." His jaw tightened. "You are making assumptions." "Am I wrong?" The silence stretched between them. A horse whinnied in the paddock beyond the manor, and the wind carried the sweet smell of hay and leather. Nathaniel had built this place with his first wife, Alina. They had started with 6 horses and a dream. She had died 3 years ago when a fever swept through the valley, and he had buried her in the meadow overlooking the western pasture. He had sworn then, standing over her grave, that he would never again let someone he loved tie their fate to his in a world this dangerous. "I am not looking for a wife," he said quietly. Rasha studied him for a long moment, and something in her dark eyes softened. "Then I will be your bodyguard. For now." The way she said it made it sound like a temporary concession rather than an agreement, but Nathaniel was too tired to argue. He needed help. The rustlers who had been harassing his property were getting bolder, and he could not keep watch alone while also running a breeding operation that required travel to 3 different market towns. "The position is yours," he said. "When can you start?" "Today." She picked up her pack and followed him through the gate into the courtyard. The manor was built of gray stone with a slate roof, 2 stories, practical rather than grand. The stables formed an L shape along the eastern side, and beyond them, the pastures rolled green and gold toward the tree line. Nathaniel had 12 horses currently, including 2 pregnant mares and a young stallion he was training for a buyer in the capital. He showed Rasha to the room in the east wing, a small but comfortable space with a window overlooking the paddocks. She set her pack on the bed and turned to him. "I will need to know your schedule, your travel routes, and who your enemies are." Nathaniel leaned against the doorframe. "There is a group of men who used to work for the previous landowner. When he died and I bought this property, they claimed I cheated them out of their inheritance. They have been trying to run me off ever since." "How many?" "4, maybe 5. They are not organized, but they are persistent. The last time they broke in, they were trying to poison the water trough." Rasha's expression darkened. "That is not just harassment. That is attempted destruction of livelihood. Which is why I need someone watching my back." He pushed off the doorframe. "Dinner is at sundown. I will introduce you to the staff." She nodded, and he left her to settle in, his heart still hammering from her audacious proposal. A wife. As if he could simply replace Alina with a hired orc woman who thought marriage was a job title. But as he walked back through the courtyard, he could not shake the image of her standing at the gate, sword across her back, telling him he was afraid. Because she was right. He was terrified of losing someone again. Terrified of opening his heart and having it carved out a second time. That night at dinner, he introduced Rasha to his small household staff. Martin, the stable master whose arm was still in a sling. Old Jenna, the cook who had been with the property since before Nathaniel bought it. Young Tom, the apprentice groom who could not have been more than 16 and stared at Rasha with wide eyes. "This is Rasha Greenfield," Nathaniel said. "She is here to provide security. Treat her as you would any member of the household." Martin nodded respectfully. Jenna ladled stew into bowls without comment. Tom continued to stare until Martin elbowed him. Rasha ate her meal in silence, watching, listening to the easy banter between the staff and Nathaniel. He was kind to them, Nathaniel realized with a strange sort of awareness, as though seeing himself through her eyes. He asked Martin about his arm, complimented Jenna on the stew, reminded Tom to check the latch on the north paddock gate. Small things. Daily things. The things Alina used to notice and love about him. After dinner, Rasha followed him out to the stables for the evening check. The horses nickered as they entered, and Nathaniel moved from stall to stall, running his hands over legs and flanks, checking water buckets. "You love them," Rasha said from the doorway. "They are my life." "Your first wife, did she love them too?" Nathaniel paused, his hand on the neck of a gray mare. "Why do you ask?" "Because you are still grieving, and I need to know what I am working with." He turned to face her. "You are working with an employer who pays on time and expects competence. That is all you need to know." Rasha crossed the distance between them, her boots soft on the hay-strewn floor. "You hired me to protect you, Nathaniel Morrison, but you are not in danger from rustlers alone. You are in danger from yourself, from this wall you have built. Walls keep enemies out, yes, but they also trap you inside. You have been here one day and you presume to lecture me about my life. I presume to do my job." She held his gaze. "A good bodyguard does not just watch for external threats. She watches for the internal ones too, the ones that make a man careless, the ones that make him stop caring whether he lives or dies." "I care." "Do you?" She gestured at the manor, the stables, the empty courtyards. You live alone in a house meant for a family. You work yourself to exhaustion. You hire protection instead of building a life that is worth protecting. Tell me I am wrong." Nathaniel wanted to argue, wanted to throw her audacity back in her face. But the words died in his throat because she was not wrong. He had been going through the motions for 3 years, maintaining the business, keeping the horses, but not really living. "Alina died because I could not protect her from a fever," he said finally. "There was nothing I could do. I held her hand and watched her slip away, and I swore I would never feel that helpless again. So yes, I keep people at a distance. It is safer that way." "Safer for whom?" "For them." Rasha shook her head slowly. "Your wife did not die because you failed to protect her. She died because we are mortal, all of us. Human, orc, it does not matter. Death comes when it comes. Shutting people out does not change that. It only means you die alone." The gray mare pushed her nose against Nathaniel's shoulder, and he absently stroked her muzzle. His throat felt tight. "I do not know how to do this differently." "Then let me show you." Rasha's voice gentled. "Let me be what you need, not just a sword at your back, but a partner, someone who shares the burden, someone who stays. I hired you as a bodyguard. For now." That phrase again, loaded with patience and promise. "But the offer stands. Think about it." She left him then, walking back toward the manor, and Nathaniel stood in the quiet stable with his horses and his ghosts, and the uncomfortable realization that this orc woman had seen through him in a single day. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm. Rasha accompanied him on his rounds, watched the property at night, and trained with her sword in the mornings before breakfast. She was good, better than good. Nathaniel watched her move through combat forms in the courtyard and understood why her commanding officer had praised her so highly. She was also relentlessly cheerful, which irritated him more than it should. She joked with Martin and Jenna, taught Tom some basic defensive moves, and treated the manor like a home rather than a job site. She was making herself indispensable, Nathaniel realized. Not through grand gestures, but through 100 small acts of care. When he worked late in the study going over breeding records, she brought him tea. When Martin struggled to manage a skittish horse one-handed, she stepped in without being asked. When a storm blew through and damaged part of the stable roof, she climbed up with the repairs crew and worked alongside them until it was fixed. And every evening she found some reason to talk to him. Small conversations at first, the weather, the horses, the state of the roads. Then deeper things. She told him about her time in the cavalry, about the friends she had lost in border skirmishes, about the loneliness of being an orc in a human-dominated force. "They respected my skill, but never really trusted me," she said one night as they walked the property perimeter. The moon was high and full, casting silver light across the pastures. "I was always the outsider, the one they relied on in a fight but did not invite to dinner afterward. That must have been hard." "It was, but it taught me something important." She looked at him. "Home is not where you are tolerated, it is where you are chosen, where someone looks at you and decides you are worth the risk." Nathaniel knew what she was really saying. The conversation was not about the cavalry, it was about him, about them. "I am not ready," he said quietly. "I know." She smiled, and it was not the bold, confident expression she usually wore but something softer. "But you will be, and I will be here when you are." 3 days later the rustlers came. Nathaniel woke to the sound of breaking glass and Rasha's shout. He grabbed the sword he kept by his bed, barely used since Alina's death, and ran into the corridor. Rasha met him at the stairs, already armed, her face grim. 4 men. "They came over the east wall. One is in the stable, the others are trying to force the study door." Martin and Jenna. "Safe in their rooms. I told Tom to bar his door and stay put. They moved together down the stairs, Nathaniel's heart pounding. He heard the crash of splintering wood from the study, heard rough voices cursing, and then they were at the doorway and he saw them. 4 men in dark clothing, faces covered, one holding a torch. "Get out of my house," Nathaniel said, his voice steady despite the fear singing through his veins. The largest man turned and Nathaniel recognized his eyes. Marcus Hale, the ringleader of the displaced workers. "This is not your house," Marcus snarled. "It belongs to the Hale family. You are a thief and we are taking back what is ours. You have no legal claim and you know it." Marcus raised the torch. "We will burn you out then. See how your precious horses like smoke." Rasha moved before Nathaniel could process what was happening. She crossed the distance to Marcus in 3 strides, knocked the torch from his hand and put her blade to his throat. "Drop your weapons or I open his neck." The other 3 men froze. One held a crowbar, another had a knife. The third was empty-handed but looked ready to bolt. "You are just a hired orc," Marcus spat. "You do not have the stomach for this." Rasha's smile was cold. "I spent 5 years in cavalry border skirmishes. I have killed men for less than threatening my employer's home. Try me." The crowbar clattered to the floor, then the knife. The third man raised his hands. "Good," Rasha said. "Now Nathaniel is going to fetch the constable from town while I keep you company, and if any of you move, I will demonstrate exactly what a hired orc can do." Nathaniel ran. He saddled his fastest horse and rode hard through the night to the town 3 miles south, woke the constable, and brought him back with 2 deputies. By the time they returned, Rasha had the 4 men bound and sitting against the study wall. She had not let them move an inch. The constable took custody of the rustlers, promised to see them tried for attempted arson and trespassing, and left as dawn broke over the hills. Nathaniel stood in his ransacked study, looking at the broken door, the scattered papers, the scorch mark where the torch had fallen. Rasha appeared in the doorway, wiping blood from a small cut on her arm. "One of them got a lucky swing before I disarmed him. It is nothing. You saved my home. That is what you hired me to do." "No." Nathaniel crossed to her, took her hands in his. They were rough, calloused, strong. "You did more than that. You fought for this place like it was yours, like it mattered to you personally." "It does." Her voice was soft now, all the steel gone. "Because you matter to me. This place matters to me. I told you at the gate, Nathaniel. A wife guards a home better than any hired sword. Not because she is paid to, but because it is hers. Because you are hers." He looked down at their joined hands, at the green skin against his tan, at the way her fingers curled around his like they belonged there. 3 years he had spent building walls. 3 years of keeping everyone at arm's length. And this woman had walked up to his gate and simply refused to stay at a distance. "I am afraid," he admitted. "I am afraid of losing you the way I lost Alina." "I know." Rasha squeezed his hands. "But Nathaniel, you did not keep Alina safe by loving her. She got sick. That was not your fault. And shutting me out will not protect me either. It will only mean we both live alone when we could live together." "Alina was lonely at the end," he whispered. "I was so focused on the business, on building something secure, that I did not see how much time I was wasting. Time we could have spent together. And then she was gone and all that security meant nothing. Then do not make the same mistake twice." Rasha released one of his hands to cup his face, her thumb brushing along his jaw. "Let me in. Let me guard your back and your heart. Let me be your wife in truth, not just in my own stubborn imagination." Nathaniel laughed, and it came out half a sob. "You really decided this the moment you saw my notice." "I decided when I read between the lines. A man who needs a bodyguard but lives alone. A man who pays well but wants no ties. a man who is running from connection rather than toward it. I thought, here is someone who needs guarding from himself more than from rustlers, and then I met you and I knew I was right. You are terrifying. I am perfect for you. She grinned, tusks catching the early morning light. Admit it. And he did, because she was right. Because he was tired of being afraid. Because this bold, brilliant orc woman had walked into his life and refused to accept anything less than the truth. Marry me, he said. Not because you declared yourself hired as my wife, but because I am asking, because I want you here. Because I do not want to do this alone anymore. Yes, Rasha said simply. I thought you would never ask. He kissed her then, there in the destroyed study with the dawn pouring through the windows, and it felt like coming home after a long exile. She wrapped her arms around him and kissed him back with a fierceness that made his knees weak, and when they finally broke apart they were both grinning. I should probably court you properly, Nathaniel said. Take you to town. Introduce you as my betrothed rather than my bodyguard. We can do that. Rasha traced a finger along his collar. But first, let us clean up this mess, and then you can show me the meadow where Alina is buried. I want to visit her, to tell her thank you for loving you first and promise her I will love you well. The tightness in Nathaniel's chest, the one that had lived there for 3 years, finally eased. She would have liked you. Of course she would have. I am delightful. They spent the morning repairing the study door and cleaning up the damage. Martin and Jenna and Tom emerged from their rooms, relieved and excited by the news of the engagement. Jenna immediately began planning a feast. Tom asked if there would be dancing. Martin just clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder and said it was about time. That afternoon, Nathaniel took Rasha to the western meadow. Alina's grave was marked by a simple stone beneath a willow tree, and the grass around it was thick with wildflowers. Rasha knelt beside it, placed her hand on the warm stone, and spoke softly. I will take care of him, she promised. I will make him laugh and keep him safe and remind him every day that life is worth living. Thank you for showing him how to love. I will honor that gift. Nathaniel knelt beside her, his hand covering hers on the stone. I will always love her, he said, but I can love you too. Differently, but no less truly. I know. Rasha leaned her head against his shoulder. Love is not a finite resource, Nathaniel. It grows. It makes room. There is space in your heart for both of us. They sat there together for a long time, the wind moving through the willow branches, the horses grazing in the distant paddocks. It felt right. It felt like healing. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Nathaniel took Rasha to town and introduced her properly, endured the stares and whispers with his head high and her hand firmly in his. Some people frowned. Some muttered. But many, including the constable and the magistrate and the merchants Nathaniel did business with, offered genuine congratulations. You are not the first to marry across species, the magistrate said. And you will not be the last. The world is changing. About time, too. They were married on a bright autumn morning in the manor courtyard, beneath the same oak tree where Rasha had first told him she would be his wife. A traveling priest performed the ceremony, and the household staff stood as witnesses. Martin had tears in his eyes. Jenna brought out a cake that must have taken her days to prepare. Tom played a surprisingly competent fiddle. When the priest asked Nathaniel to speak his vows, he took Rasha's hands and said, I promise to let you guard my back and my heart. I promise to be brave enough to love you fully. I promise to build a life with you that is worth protecting. Rasha smiled, and when it was her turn, she said, I promise to stay, through danger and peace, through fear and joy. You hired me as a bodyguard, but I hired myself as your wife, and I am very good at my job. Everyone laughed, and the priest pronounced them married, and Nathaniel kissed his wife beneath the oak tree while the household cheered. The celebration lasted into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than 12 people could possibly eat. Rasha danced with Martin, teaching him a cavalry reel. Nathaniel danced with Jenna, who scolded him for waiting so long to find happiness. And when the moon rose, Nathaniel and Rasha slipped away to the room that was now theirs, on the second floor overlooking the pastures. "Hello, husband," Rasha said, closing the door behind them. "Hello, wife." He pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "You realize you have bound yourself to a stubborn horse breeder with enemies and a dangerous profession." "I realize I have bound myself to a good man who needed someone stubborn enough to break through his walls. I am up to the challenge." They made love slowly, learning each other's rhythms, mapping new territory with gentle hands and whispered promises. Rasha's skin was warm beneath his fingers, her strength evident in every movement, her tenderness a revelation. Nathaniel had forgotten what it felt like to be this vulnerable, this open, and it was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Afterward they lay tangled together, moonlight spilling across the bed, and Rasha traced patterns on his chest. "Tell me about the horses," she said. "The breeding program, what you are trying to accomplish." So he did. He told her about his dream of developing a line that combined speed and endurance, about the careful selection of bloodlines, about the young stallion he was training who showed remarkable promise. She listened intently, asked intelligent questions, and he realized this was part of what she had meant by partnership. She wanted to understand his work, to share in it, to be part of every aspect of his life. "I want to help," she said. "I know horses from the cavalry. I can assist with training, maybe even travel with you to the markets. 2 sets of eyes are better than one, and I am very persuasive when it comes to negotiations." "I do not doubt that for a moment." He kissed her forehead. "We will build this together, the business, the home, all of it." "Together," she agreed, and settled against him with a contented sigh. The months that followed were the happiest Nathaniel could remember. Rasha proved invaluable in every aspect of the operation. She had a gift for reading horses, for knowing which ones had spirit and which ones were merely skittish. She accompanied him to markets and stood at his side during negotiations, her presence both reassuring and impressive. Buyers respected her, and the few who muttered about orcs quickly changed their tune when they saw the quality of the horses and the efficiency of the operation. Together, they sold 6 horses that winter for excellent prices. They used the profit to expand the stables and purchase 2 more breeding mares. Rasha suggested they offer riding lessons to local children, a way to build community goodwill and generate steady income, and Nathaniel agreed. Soon, every 6th day afternoon, a handful of young people gathered in the paddock while Rasha taught them the basics of horsemanship. She was good with them, patient and encouraging, and Nathaniel found himself watching her teach with a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with profit margins. One evening in early spring, as they walked the property perimeter, Rasha stopped suddenly and pressed a hand to her stomach. "What is wrong?" Nathaniel asked, instantly alert. "Nothing is wrong." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I am pregnant." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Pregnant?" "Yes, you stubborn horse breeder. We are going to have a child." Nathaniel swept her into his arms, laughing and spinning her around until she protested breathlessly. He set her down carefully, suddenly terrified of jostling her, and she laughed at his expression. "I am not made of glass, Nathaniel. I am an orc woman who fought in cavalry skirmishes. I can handle being pregnant. I know, but let me worry a little. It is my job as a husband. Fair enough." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "A child, our child." "Are you happy?" I am terrified and thrilled and so very happy." He kissed her, soft and reverent. "Thank you. Thank me in 6 months when I am enormous and cranky." But she was radiant, even as her belly swelled through the spring and summer. She continued to help with the horses until Nathaniel insisted she take it easier, and even then she supervised from the fence, offering advice and encouragement. Jenna fussed over her, preparing special meals and herbal teas. Martin built a cradle in his workshop, intricate and beautiful. Tom declared himself the baby's future guardian and practiced his defensive forms with renewed dedication. The child came on a warm September evening, delivered by the town midwife with Nathaniel holding Rasha's hand the entire time. It was a boy, healthy and loud, with his mother's green skin and his father's brown eyes. They named him Aldrich, and Nathaniel held his son with shaking hands, overcome by the miracle of this tiny life they had created together. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Of course he is." Rasha, exhausted but glowing, reached up to touch the baby's soft head. "He is ours." Aldrich grew quickly, a cheerful child who loved the horses and followed his parents everywhere. When he was 2, Rasha became pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter. They named her Sira, and she had her father's tan skin and her mother's pointed ears. She was quieter than her brother, thoughtful and observant, and she took to the horses like she had been born in the saddle. The household expanded with the children. They hired a nursemaid, a young woman from town named Clara who adored both kids. The manor, once so empty and silent, filled with laughter and noise and the chaos of family life. Nathaniel, who had once thought he would live out his days alone, found himself surrounded by love at every turn. The breeding operation thrived. Word spread about Morrison horses, known for their temperament and endurance, and buyers came from farther away each year. Rasha's riding lessons grew into a full training program, and they hired an assistant to help manage it. Martin's arm healed fully, and he trained Tom to take over more responsibilities, eyeing a well-earned retirement. 5 years after their wedding, Nathaniel stood in the western meadow where Alina was buried, Rasha at his side, their children playing in the grass nearby. They came here twice a year, on Alina's birthday and on the anniversary of her death, to tend the grave and remember. "I think she would be proud of you," Rasha said quietly, "of what you have built, who you have become. I think she would be grateful to you." Nathaniel slipped an arm around his wife's waist. "For forcing your way past my defenses, for refusing to let me hide. It was the best business decision I ever made." Rasha leaned against him. "Walking up to your gate that day and announcing I would be your wife instead of your bodyguard. You were so confident." "I was desperate," she laughed softly. "I had been looking for a place to belong for years. I saw your notice and something in my gut said this is it. This is home, so I took a chance. I am very glad you did." Aldrich ran up to them, his small face serious. "Papa, Sira says I cannot ride the gray mare yet, but I am big enough, right?" "We will see," Nathaniel said diplomatically. "Ask your mother. She is the expert." Rasha grinned and scooped up their son. "The gray mare is very tall, little one, but perhaps we can start you on the chestnut pony." "How does that sound?" Aldrich whooped with joy, and Sira came running, not wanting to be left out, and soon both children were clamoring for riding lessons right now, immediately, this very moment. Nathaniel and Rasha exchanged amused glances and herded their children back toward the stables, the meadow peaceful behind them. As they walked, Nathaniel thought about the man he had been 5 years ago, closed off, afraid, living half a life. And he thought about the orc woman who had appeared at his gate and simply refused to accept that version of him. She had pushed and prodded and loved him into becoming whole again. She had given him a family, a partnership, a home filled with warmth and purpose. She had guarded his back and his heart with equal fierceness, and she had made him believe that life, for all its dangers and sorrows, was worth living fully. That evening, after the children were in bed and the household was quiet, Nathaniel found Rasha in the courtyard beneath the oak tree where they had married. She was sitting on the stone bench, her face tipped up to the stars. He sat beside her and took her hand. "You ever regret it? Walking up to a stranger's gate and declaring yourself his wife, not for a single moment." She squeezed his fingers. "Do you regret saying yes?" "Never." He kissed her knuckles. "You are the bravest person I have ever met. Not because you fought rustlers or served in the cavalry, but because you looked at a broken man and decided he was worth the effort to fix. You were not broken, just scared. And I did not fix you, Nathaniel. I just reminded you that you were still alive. The rest you did yourself." They sat together in the starlight, shoulders touching, hands entwined. The horses were quiet in the stables. The manor stood solid and warm behind them. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, and a breeze carried the scent of autumn grass and coming rain. "I love you," Nathaniel said. Simple words, but they held the weight of years and choices and second chances. "I love you too," Rasha replied. "My stubborn horse breeder, my employer who became my husband, my home." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars wheel slowly overhead. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ruins of fear and loss. The manor would stand for generations, Nathaniel thought. Their children would grow and have children of their own, and the Morrison name would be known not just for horses, but for love that crossed boundaries and refused to accept defeat. All because an orc woman had walked up to his gate one autumn afternoon and rewritten the terms of his life with 7 simple words. "I will be your wife instead." And so she was. Now and for all the years ahead, guarding his heart as fiercely as she had once guarded his back, proving every day that the best protection any person could have was someone who chose to stay. The wind rose, carrying the promise of rain, and Nathaniel pulled his wife closer. They would go inside soon, return to the warmth of the manor and the sleeping children and the life they had built together. But for this moment, they simply sat beneath the stars and breathed in the impossible, wonderful truth of their existence. She had hired herself as his wife, and he had been wise enough, finally, to accept the position. It was the best arrangement either of them had ever made, and every day since had proven it. Every shared meal, every crisis weathered together, every quiet evening and chaotic morning with the children. Every moment built on the foundation of that audacious proposal and his eventual surrender to hope. Winter came early that year, blanketing the manor in snow, and the family stayed close to the fires, telling stories and playing games and making plans for spring. Nathaniel taught Aldrich to carve wood the way his own father had taught him. Rasha worked with Sira on reading, discovering her daughter had a quick mind for letters. Clara baked bread that filled the house with warmth, and Martin retired fully, moving to a cottage at the edge of the property where he could still visit the horses but no longer carry the burden of daily labor. On the shortest day of the year, the household gathered for a feast. It had become tradition, this celebration of light in the darkness, and Jenna outdid herself with roasted meat and root vegetables, and a cake layered with honey and nuts. They ate until they were stuffed, and then Tom pulled out his fiddle and Martin revealed a surprising talent for singing, and the children danced until they could barely stand. Later, when the guests had gone to bed and only Nathaniel and Rasha remained in the great room, they sat before the fire with cups of mulled wine and watched the flames dance. "It is hard to believe this is my life sometimes," Nathaniel admitted. 5 years ago I was alone. Now I have all this. You were never meant to be alone. Rasha set down her cup and moved to sit on the floor between his knees, leaning back against him. You were always meant to be surrounded by people who love you. You just needed someone stubborn enough to make you see it. Thank the stars for stubborn orc women. He wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on top of her head. What do you want for the future, Rasha? If you could have anything— She was quiet for a moment, considering. I want exactly this. Our family, our home, our work. I want to watch our children grow and maybe add another if we are blessed. I want to train more riders and improve the breeding line. I want to grow old with you and know that we built something that matters. That sounds perfect to me. Good. She tilted her head back to look at him. Because you are stuck with me, Nathaniel Morrison. I hired myself as your wife and I take my employment very seriously. He laughed and kissed her, and the fire crackled merrily, and outside the snow fell soft and steady on the manor and the stables, and the meadow where the past rested peacefully beneath the present's joy. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm. Aldrich grew into a tall, serious boy with his mother's directness and his father's love of horses. Sierra developed a gift for training, able to calm even the most nervous animals with a few soft words. When she was 6, she announced she wanted to be a horse breeder like her father, and Nathaniel felt his heart might burst with pride. They added 2 more children to the family. Another girl, Elise, who had her mother's green skin and a personality as bold as a summer storm. And finally, a boy they named Darius, quiet and thoughtful, who liked to follow Martin around and learn about woodworking. The manor was chaos most days, filled with children and staff and horses, and the endless work of running a successful operation. But it was a good chaos, the kind that meant life was being lived fully, and Nathaniel would not have traded it for anything. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Rasha surprised him with a gift. She led him to the courtyard where they had married, and there stood a new stone marker beneath the oak tree. It was carved with their names, the date of their wedding, and a single line. She hired herself, and he was wise enough to say yes. Nathaniel read it 3 times, his vision blurring, and then he pulled his wife into his arms and held her tight. I love you, he said fiercely. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that. Good, Rasha said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. Because I am not going anywhere, ever. You are mine, Nathaniel Morrison, and I protect what is mine. Best bodyguard I ever hired. Best wife you ever married too, only wife, even better. She pulled back to grin at him. Means I have no competition. They stood together beneath the oak, 10 years married and more in love than ever, and Nathaniel marveled at the strange, wonderful path his life had taken. From grief and isolation to this abundance of love and family. From a man afraid to connect to a husband and father who could not imagine his life any other way, all because an orc woman had been bold enough to rewrite the rules, to see past what he was asking for to what he actually needed, and to guard not just his life but his capacity for joy. The children came running then, shouting about some crisis in the stables, and the moment of reflection ended as they all hurried to investigate. It turned out to be nothing serious, just Aldrich trying to teach Sierra a new trick and accidentally spooking one of the mares. They sorted it out together, the whole family working in concert, and by dinner time everything was back to normal. That night, after the children were asleep and the household was quiet, Nathaniel and Rasha stood at the window of their bedroom and looked out over the moonlit pastures. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? Nathaniel asked. About a wife guarding a home better than a hired sword. I do. You were right, about all of it, about what I needed, about what we could build, about staying. He turned to face her. You gave me my life back, Rasha. You gave me a reason to stop just existing and start living again. You did the same for me." She cupped his face in her hands. "I was drifting before I found you, looking for a place to belong. You gave me a home, a purpose, a family. We saved each other, Nathaniel. That is what partners do." He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring 10 years of gratitude and love into it. When they finally parted, both were smiling. "Come to bed," Rasha said. "Tomorrow we have a farm to run and children to wrangle and horses to train. But tonight we rest." They climbed into bed together, fitting into each other's arms with the ease of long practice. And Nathaniel thought about how different this was from 5 years ago, when he had slept alone in this room surrounded by ghosts and regrets. Now he slept surrounded by love, by the sounds of his children breathing in nearby rooms, by the solid warmth of his wife beside him. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness. "For what? For being stubborn. For not taking no for an answer. For forcing your way into my life and refusing to leave." Rasha's laugh was soft and warm. "You are welcome. Now sleep, my love. We have years and years ahead of us, and I intend to spend every one of them at your side." Nathaniel drifted off with those words in his ears and a smile on his face, and his dreams were peaceful and full of light. The seasons turned, as they always did. Spring brought new foals and the chaos of training young horses. Summer meant long days in the sun, teaching riders and making trips to distant markets. Autumn was harvest time, not just for crops but for the culmination of years of breeding work, as buyers returned year after year for Morrison horses. Winter meant quiet and planning, and the family drawn close around the fire. Through it all, Nathaniel and Rasha worked side by side. They disagreed sometimes, argued occasionally, but always came back to the fundamental truth that bound them together. They were partners in every sense of the word. Equals who had chosen each other and continued choosing each other every single day. When Aldrich turned 12, he asked to be apprenticed formally in the breeding program, and Nathaniel agreed with pride. When Sira was 10, she successfully trained her first horse from scratch, a skittish young mare who became gentle and responsive under her patient hand. Elise decided she wanted to be a cavalry rider like her mother, and Rasha began teaching her advanced combat techniques. Darius, at 8, announced he wanted to build saddles and tack, combining his love of craft with the family business. Each child found their place, their passion, and Nathaniel and Rasha supported them all, proud of the people their children were becoming. The manor itself grew and changed. They added a new wing to accommodate the expanding family and hired more staff as the business thrived. The riding program that Rasha had started now drew students from 3 provinces. The Morrison name became synonymous with quality and integrity, known not just for excellent horses, but for fair dealing and community investment. They employed locals when they could, supported the town in times of hardship, and treated every person who came through their gates with respect, regardless of species or background. It was their quiet rebellion against the prejudice that still existed in many places, their way of proving that humans and orcs could not just coexist, but thrive together. One autumn evening, 15 years after their wedding, Nathaniel found Rasha standing at the fence of the western pasture, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. He joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about? How lucky I am." She leaned into him. "I took such a risk that day walking up to your gate. I could have been turned away. You could have called me crazy and hired someone else. I would have been an idiot to do that." "Yes, you would have," she smiled. "But you were grieving and scared, and it would have been understandable. Instead, you let me stay. You let me in. You gave me a chance to prove myself." Best decision I ever made, mine too. She turned to face him fully. I want you to know something, Nathaniel. Every day I wake up beside you, I am grateful. Grateful that you were brave enough to risk your heart again. Grateful that we built this life. Grateful for our children and our home and every moment we have together. I feel the same way. He tucked a strand of hair behind her pointed ear. You gave me a second chance at happiness, Rasha. You showed me that life goes on, that love does not die with loss, it just changes and grows. I will never be able to thank you enough for that. Then do not try. She kissed him softly. Just love me, stay with me, grow old with me. That is all the thanks I need. I can do that, he grinned. After all, I hired you as my bodyguard. You are supposed to stay close. I hired myself as your wife, she corrected, as she always did. Much better contract. They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the deepening blue sky. Behind them, the manor glowed with warm light, and they could hear the distant sounds of their children and the household preparing for dinner. This was home. This was family. This was the life they had built from courage and stubborn hope, and the refusal to accept loneliness as inevitable. Nathaniel Morrison, once a man afraid to love again, now loved with his whole heart. And Rasha Greenfield Morrison, once an orc woman looking for a place to belong, now stood at the center of a family and home she had claimed through sheer determination and unwavering loyalty. They had both hired each other, really. She as his wife, he as her husband. And the terms of that contract were simple. Forever, together, come what may. As they walked back to the manor hand in hand, the stars bright overhead and the future stretching golden before them, they knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right choice. Every day since that first afternoon beneath the oak tree had proven it. She had been right from the beginning. A wife guarded a home better than any hired sword. Not with a blade, though Rasha certainly still knew how to wield one. But with love, with presence, with the determination to stay and build and fight for what mattered. And what mattered was this: the family they had created, the home they had built, the love that sustained them through every challenge and celebrated every joy. It was everything Nathaniel had thought he lost when Alina died. Everything he had been too afraid to reach for. And it had come to him in the form of an orc woman with a sword on her back, and a proposal that sounded insane but turned out to be the sanest thing either of them had ever done. They reached the manor door, and Aldrich opened it from inside, calling that dinner was ready. The smell of Jenna's cooking wafted out, and they heard the laughter of their children and the warmth of family gathered together. Nathaniel looked at Rasha one more time, his wife of 15 years, his partner in all things, the woman who had saved him from a half-life of fear and isolation. "Ready?" she asked, gesturing toward the light and warmth inside. "Always," he said. "As long as you are with me, I am ready for anything." They crossed the threshold together, into the home they had built and the life they had chosen. And the door closed behind them on a world made infinitely better by their courage to love across boundaries and their wisdom to recognize that the best protection anyone could ever have was someone who chose to stay. The evening unfolded in laughter and food and the comfortable chaos of a large family. And as Nathaniel looked around the table at his wife and children, and the people who had become like family, he felt a peace so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He had been hired to live alone and protect himself from pain by never risking his heart again. But Rasha had hired herself to guard that heart by filling it so full of love there was no room left for fear. And in the end, her way had been right all along.